Good evening, everybody. It's 6:30. Welcome to the Audit and Accounts Committee. I have first to... let's see, I wasn't ready for that. I have first to just remind you the fire evacuation procedures for this evening's meeting. There are no fire alarms scheduled for this evening, but if the alarm sounds, please evacuate the building immediately. The public exit is located at the rear of this room. Exit through reception, unless otherwise instructed, to meet in the War Memorial Park. This meeting is being webcast live on the internet and will be available to view on YouTube after the meeting. The feed's working, right, Phil? Thank you. And microphones, can I please remind members and officers that in order to be heard clearly within the room by those present and on the webcast, you must speak directly into your microphone. And please switch your mobile phones to silent. So first of all, apologies for absence and substitutions. I have apologies from Councillor Tom. I think everyone else is here, so I think we have full house. So no other apologies or absence or substitutions. Item 2, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? I'm not seeing any, so we'll move on to item 3, urgent matters. Are there any urgent matters? I'm not aware of any. Jackie.
In the property report, I'm a trustee at a community centre, which I think that comes into our property portfolio. I don't think it's necessary, but I thought I'd just say it just to be clear.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Stustane. Yeah, that's a disclosure that it's wise to make. I'm not sure that's the right place to do it on the agenda, but it doesn't matter, does it? Okay, brilliant. So, moving on to item 4, minutes of the meeting held on 24th of November 2025. I've got the minutes here for signature, but I did want to draw committee's attention to one or two of the minutes. Minute 29-24 and minute 30-24. You'll recall that the auditors were here at the last meeting and were unclear on whether we would have a disclaimed audit opinion or a qualified audit opinion in the circumstance where in this a qualified opinion is better, and so we were waiting for that. We have some reassurance that they're pursuing the qualified opinion, but that is taking longer, and so Adam and I haven't signed the accounts yet. So I was just going to ask, I just wanted to draw that to committee's attention, and just for the minutes ask that committee is happy to extend that authority through to the next meeting. Simon.
More than happy to support that if I can, Chair. Just one of those points of clarity was that we're not expecting any big differences, so I think that would be really quite reassuring if we find that out.
Adam, would you like to cover that?
Yeah, not a problem, Chair. So EY have finished their field work now. There's been sort of one change to the accounts of 100,000 across the revenue and balance sheet, which relates to provisions on business rates. It was just something that they picked up through their review. As the chairs indicated, EY are going through their internal processes for pursuing that qualified opinion. It's just taken longer because of national processes as well, and they expect to be issuing that either towards the end of next week or the beginning of the week after, so before the backstop deadline, which is the end of February the 27th.
Thank you, Adam. So does the committee agree that the minutes of the meeting held on 24th November 25 are an accurate record? Yeah. That's agreed. Thank you. Moving on to item 5, the draft Treasury Management Strategy for 2026-27. I'll ask our Section 151 officer, Adam Swain, to introduce the report. Adam.
Thank you, Chair. Yep, so this is the Treasury Management Strategy for the next financial year that will go on to Council. So the committee are asked to provide comments on this before it's considered by Council at the end of February. Just draw attention to the committee for a couple of little bits. Section 11 on page 18 of the pack sets out the recommended changes to the strategy this year. Not lots. One is to propose to increase the local authority loans total balance from 40 million to 50 million. This reflects the low level of credit risk offered by these investment types, and also reflects the position that the council's in terms of our use of our investment balances for over the next couple of years. So moving more towards short-term and medium-term investments, so they offer a better return. And the counter to that is to recommend reducing the limit for bond funds from 40 million to 30 million. Again, reflecting the fact that we're investing more over the short to medium term rather than for the longer term. The overall return forecast for next year is expected to be 4.41 million, which is 3.79%. Again, this reflects the reducing rates that we're expecting over the next sort of 12 months, down to 3.25%. And that was all I was going to cover, but happy to take questions.
Thank you, Adam. Councillor Tustain, you have a question?
Yeah, I did have a question about the local authority loans. It's obviously us lending money out to other local authorities. And I thought with LGR and everything happening, I just wondered whether that's factored in, because obviously there could be debts that then start moving around, and it may become quite tricky to get payment back and things.
Thank you, Councillor Tustain. Adam, do you want to cover that?
So we tend to invest quite short term, up to a year with them. So we're well aware of where LGR is impacting. Obviously, Surrey's the next one. As with everything with local government reorganisation, debts would novate across the successor authorities, but we would be mindful of that as part of our checks that we do. So we do a lot of checks on these before we make any investments, not on the current basis, in terms of looking at balance sheets, medium-term financial strategies, other information out there as well, and are quite selective in terms of who we invest with. And that would obviously be a consideration for us because it could increase risk, but I would imagine it would be lower risk end.
Councillor Isaac.
Good evening, Chief Financial Officer. Can I ask us to go to page 37 or page 38 actually, the chart, the asset benchmark. So it says before that chart 1 shows the council's asset benchmark and shows the net investment requirement reducing over time as resources are used to fund the capital programme expenditure. It is a very significant capital expenditure, isn't it? And we're going from a council with net assets, these are liquid assets, of around about 15 million, down to somewhere around about 30. Yep. So what is the trajectory beyond this, and is it going to start once the capital expenditure has, presumably in relation to the leisure park, has been met? Would you expect that chart to start turning upwards in terms of our net assets?
Short answer is yes. You're right. That does reflect the significant investment in the leisure park. There are also receipts expected from Manydown and other in projects over the next few years as well, beyond this forecast. So that is what it is reflecting, is the spend on capital. It is fully included as well in terms of the medium-term financial strategy and the budget that's coming forward to council next month, in terms of the impact on our returns, because clearly at the moment we've got 4.4 million of treasury management income. That will decrease as we've got lower balances invested, so that is taken account of as well.
John, you have a follow-up question?
Yeah. So just for, out of interest, does that signal that from beyond 2030 there's effectively no money in the pot for any capital investments because it's all been spent?
That will be covered by the capital programme update that will come to council in February, but there is a significant investment there. I say that is a long time in the future, and we will probably be in the world of local government reorganisation, so I can't answer that question in 4 years' time. But at this stage, that is what we're expecting, that there will be less funds there. We are able to fund our capital programme at the moment from internal resources and capital receipts and other sources, but that's covered as part of the capital report.
So that was a qualified yes.
Councillor James, you had a perspective or question?
Yeah, only to say when you look at our capital programme, there's so much about capital in terms of income that's unpredictable. Great Wharf may happen. That's not reflected in here. And that would generate additional money coming in to the council. And as alluded to, is Manydown. I don't think anyone by choice would have done the leisure park and Manydown in this time sequence, because inevitably right now with Manydown we're exposed. We're giving out B loans, which sit as capital expenditure, but they're actually not, because obviously we're going to get a return on those. But that's going out before the Manydown money has come in. Had we done Manydown 10 years ago, then we would be at the point where we're getting capital receipts from Manydown, which of course would mean we're in a sort of a different position. So we are, Councillor Isaac, exactly right, because right now, between now and 2030, we're spending a lot of money on the leisure park. That then stops because it's built. At the same time, with Manydown, at the moment we're putting money in to do the infrastructure. At some point we will get the money back. I think 2031, 2032, we'll suddenly get large chunks of capital receipts from Manydown. So it does go down, and then suddenly it may shoot up depending what the new authority decides to do with the Manydown receipts. But there's no cause for panic.
And of course, if we wanted to change that, we would change potentially the property investment strategy to say that capital receipts realised in there wouldn't necessarily be reinvested in investment property. They might be used for another capital project, which we don't know what it is yet, and it's beyond 2030. So I think it's
It would be a decision of the new authority, obviously have a property investment strategy and the treasury management strategy, and decide where the money goes, because you could take those capital receipts from Manydown and say we are going to use them all for capital projects that don't necessarily like another leisure park, another leisure centre or something similar. Or you could decide, no, because we're now a larger authority, we want to put that into property and generate a revenue from that. But obviously a decision that's going to be made by a future authority as to what they feel best meets their needs. I suspect it'd be a split of some description between treasury, property investment, and also putting some into capital to support future sort of community beneficial projects.
I guess the point I was making was this is one pot on its own, and there are other pots. I'm getting blank looks. I'm obviously not informed.
Yes.
Oh, Adam, thank you.
No,
The other finance guy.
that is correct. This is purely focusing on our treasury investments that are held to generate returns and held for such for that purpose. There are obviously we do include the prudential indicators as a requirement. It's a fair challenge in terms of the reduction over the time, but that is well known and is planned for.
On, you have another question.
Yeah, so but it's interesting because that does raise the point, because what we're doing here effectively is using liquid resources instead of capital resources like property in order to exclusively fund the leisure park redevelopment. There was a choice, which was to have sold commercial property assets, which are by their very nature illiquid. But we could have done that. In effect, what we're doing is raiding our most liquid resources.
I don't know about the word raiding, but it's Councillor Tusney.
Chair, I just want to check. What can you remind us what the current spread is? What percentage do we have in the treasury, which is obviously the more liquid, as opposed to the property portfolio? Because I know we do have a very heavy property portfolio. And where will this leave us in the future if we end up going down it? Because that means it sounds like we might have even more in the property portfolio as a higher ratio to the liquid stuff.
If you're talking about investment property portfolio, I believe it's around 300 million. And as the report shows, at the moment we've got about 100 million of treasury management investments. So it's about 75-25 split in favour of property investment.
So I'm just trying to work out what that will then mean if it goes down to about 30, and that's about 90% then, isn't it, in property?
Any more crystal ball questions on what we're going to do in capital in 2031? Councillor Conquest.
Thank you. To try and understand the context of this better, maybe could you give us an idea of what the level of these liquid investments has been over, say, the last 10 years?
Pretty static at 100 million.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, it has been around the 120 million or so, and it has been planned that we would move from some of the less liquid bond funds that we had and disposed of, and I think the committee has been made aware of that over the last few years. Certainly, that we were moving from those to allow for funding this. Also worthwhile pointing out the return on, and it's covered later in the papers. Obviously, the return on those investment properties has been beneficial to the council in terms of revenue.
John.
Yeah, I just think it's not. This is the policy, but it's not too late if we wish to mix it more and look to dispose of some capital assets, property assets, and that would take some of the pressure off that's obviously signposted here in relation to our treasury management assets. Because the other thing to bear in mind, of course, is there might be some emergency coming down that we can't foresee, where there would be a requirement for us to find money quickly. And at the moment, I just have a concern that we're far too much orientated towards using readily disposable assets rather than looking at perhaps sort of more of a blend.
I think it's a valid concern, John. I'm struggling a little bit with why we would sell £100 million of the property yielding 5 or 5.5%, and then put it into bond funds yielding 3.5%, just so that we had liquidity for a future emergency. Well, by its very nature, we wouldn't know what it was or what the sort of exposure was. But this £100 million balance built up over years, as my understanding is that it was a capital sum which was earmarked to spend on the aquadrome or the leisure park and or many down. Most councils around the country don't have this sort of financial cushion. Most councils around the country don't have a £30 million cushion, let alone a £100 million cushion, and would normally, most of them would fund an aquadrome or a leisure park from debt from the Public Sector Works Board, is my understanding of how this sector works. But Adam.
Yeah, I think fair challenge, as you're saying. The return obviously is different there. And for context, 34 million, our net service expenditures around 46 million, so it's still a considerable amount of liquid resource that could fund that. Obviously, it's one source of income that we get for funding our services that have been protected more than others, and is carefully considered. Take your comments on board. I think obviously we're probably verging away from the purpose of this paper, which is more around the strategy for the next year and comments on that. But welcome the debate and the challenge.
Councillor Tustain.
I was going to say that I think there is another issue, because we have a lot in property. If I remember from reading the papers, it might not be this one, might be the next one. That ties us away from being able to use the public sector work loan thing.
Yeah, we can't access the cheaper
because
rates.
Of having all the property. So therefore, if we end up with less liquidity, I mean, I'm happy. As I say, we are in a comfortable position. But because of sort of having that shift and having it very heavily on the property, and then we can't access any money if we did need to have a big capital spend. And I'm going to throw something in when it comes to things like LGR, and if we're becoming a unitary, and whatever that shape of the unitary is, there are things called care homes and children's homes that are essential, and considering the profiteering that goes on in that sector at the moment, they will be essential capital investments that may well be needed in this neck of the woods. So it's important we actually might need to be thinking about that for future proofing.
I think it's a valid point, Jackie. We have had the discussion about LGR before, though, and I think the outcome was that Richard, would you like to cover this, because you were very concise and erudite on this.
In what way? Well, I mean, first thing I'd say is PWLB is extremely expensive. Long term is about 6% or thereabouts at the moment, and you wouldn't want to get involved in borrowing money at that level. and so it becomes very difficult to justify, really, because it is very expensive. And it doesn't go down either. It's a source of some irritation. Of course, I mean, most unitaries don't own any children's home or elderly persons' homes these days. Unfortunately, they sold them all to the private sector, and now they live in a difficult situation where the cost of placements goes up by about 15% a year and goes to people who are making a profit rather than anything else. The government is just starting to give 50% funding towards people who start off with building homes, but that's a program that will take a long while to come to fulfilment, really. I'm deeply jealous, really, of your situation, really, and my investment properties will lose 4.75 million this year, and that's the end of the reserves. Next year it will be a cost to the general fund. So I'd find myself, and of course, you talk about borrowing, but my borrowing is just over £1 billion. It's about equivalent to the national debt of Iceland and Finland put together. I continue to get criticised for that, but fortunately it was all long while before I went there. But I think, your strategy is the right strategy, I think, generally. But, you have the ability to review it in a year's time, and you need to keep your eye on what's happening, really, and it will change.
I have one other question. Thank you, Richard. I have one other question about, does the council have a long-term target for capital funds balance? Do we have essentially a piggy bank target for this, or is that the target on the graph?
We have a sort of liquid balance of around 25 million would be kind of the limit, and that's where we keep our liquidity at the moment, which covers kind of most ongoing costs and allows for unexpected shocks. I wouldn't expect it to drop too much below the figures there for 2030, but we'll be in a different world by then, and there will be different decisions to be made around all things are open in the LGR world, and it will be a wider portfolio of assets across the piece as well, which will need rebalancing. And Richard made that point earlier of you need to constantly review this. This is where we believe we should be at this point in time, but it might change in 12 months' time. We couldn't forecast a whole load of things. I started here nearly 4 years ago, and the Ukraine war started, I think, 3 days later and changed a lot of things. So you can never quite know what's coming down the line. It's the best judgment at the time, and hindsight's one of those beautiful things that can show you right or wrong.
Thank you, Adam. Councillor James.
Yeah, just to say, this is very much the reason why you have an MTFS. This is why you have a 3-year capital programme, because then you can look ahead and you can say, well, actually, in 3 years' time, we may have a problem, at which point we can do something about it. What you don't want to do is get in a situation, and some local authorities are in that situation, where they're so desperate to raise the funds, they are having a fire sale of their property assets and not getting best value for the taxpayer. So you've always got to take that 3-year review. The LGR process does mean that it's difficult, but let's face it, people like me and Martin are already on the Rushmore and Hart District Council websites looking around to see what we can find. And those conversations will happen more once we've got the government sort of saying this is what the new boundaries will be. Those conversations will start happening more to make sure that our budgets are aligned. And if we are going to have a cash flow crisis in 3 years' time, we've got time to actually sort of plan for that and then start looking at what assets we would sell, what assets we would cash in, etc. So it's something, that's why we have the 3-year strategy. You have to think ahead, because you don't want to be acting on impulse and in panic, because you don't get best value in a panic.
Thank you, Councillor James. I think that was Councillor Isaac's point about fire sale, wasn't it, John?
Of course, the danger is that if we delay, then we'll be selling local authority assets when everyone else is selling local authority assets. So,
Thank you. I'm just trying to work out whether we put that in some shape or form forward as a recommendation to Cabinet to just have a think about. I don't know what everyone else thinks. Oh, sorry, it goes to Council. Okay, it's slightly more complicated. If anyone's got any other questions on that point, I did just want to come back to the local authority loans. I'm with you, Jackie, on this. We have discussed it before at this committee. At the moment, we have a local authority loan maximum of 40 million at 10 million per counterparty. So we could potentially lend up to 4 local authorities £10 million. I doubt we do that. We probably lend to 7 or 8 at £3 to £5 million and sail below the limit and have a smaller counterparty risk. But I did. It's the one thing that came out of this paper and just kept tapping me on the shoulder and just saying, what are we doing here? Things are quite difficult financially in the local authority sector. I think if we were to encounter any problems with a local authority creditor, then it would carry additional reputational risk for us. And I think that I know these papers are supposed to be essentially civil service type papers and not have any political flavour as to who we lend money to, but I personally wouldn't be comfortable lending to some councils in the southeast with leadership that have explicitly stated they want to tear up the rule book. So I appreciate we'd have things like legal covenants and that sort of thing. And I'm less worried about the security of the loans. I'm quite worried about the liquidity and the ability to get our money back on time. I don't know, Richard, you look like you have something to say on this.
Well, as part of your due diligence in making the loan, you would take into account the reputational damage of lending to a council that was in some way unsafe. And that's always been the case. I mean, we've always done that, so that no local authority has defaulted on a debt since Liverpool in goodness knows when I was fairly small. But the and that was a technical thing, really. They forgot to make the payment. I think that wasn't that they couldn't afford it, but there was a huge hoo-ha about that at that time. But I don't think so. I think that's unlikely that any authority, but you just need to do your due diligence. That's the important thing, really, to make sure that you're lending to a sound authority, that your money is going to be capable of being repaid when it should be repaid. Actually, the local authority market has shrunk considerably. It's very difficult to borrow money from other local authorities in many circumstances. And although and the thing is also, you can borrow money in the early part of the year. It's almost impossible to borrow money later in the year because you haven't got the receipts coming at the early in the year. So it's a bit fragmented in that way, really. And then if you're not careful, as a borrower rather than a lender, you're forced into short-term PWLB at much more expensive rates. So you're likely to find it easy to lend money to local authorities, but you do need to do your due diligence and make sure there's no reputational damage from doing so.
Thank you, Richard. Has anyone else got anything they want to add on this discussion before I come back to Adam? Adam.
Thanks, Jen. I think it's been useful discussion, and thank you, Richard, for your comments there. We do go through a very rigorous process and consider all investments, and that be it local authority or other types on a case by case basis. We look at the reputational risk, we look at MTFS, we look at other kind of metrics in terms of last few years, in terms of ratios on the balance sheet, those sort of things as well as kind of wider press type considerations, just to make sure that the council's not going to be put in an awkward position, because clearly that's not the case that we want to be in, and we have and we will continue to be selective and will reject loans to authorities that might be paying more but are considered too risky. So we do already do that. As Richard indicated, it is very secure market. There haven't been defaults, and the risk of a default or late payment, the reputation risk for the borrower as well, would be quite damaging and would be very expensive, because clearly if it gets out into quite a small market that they are taking time or not paying on time, that obviously puts them under pressure as well for being able to borrow. So the suggestion here as well is to increase it, just to align it. Doesn't mean we will go up to that. It just gives us the flexibility if there are opportunities.
Thank you, Adam. It's reassuring to hear all of that. I know you go through due diligence, but it's reassuring to hear it again and for everyone. I'm just, and I kind of hear it and I understand it and I understand the history. I just think that local government is going through unprecedented change, and when you have unprecedented change, that tends to be when things that people haven't anticipated get flushed out. And I just for me, I feel it's an area that we should be decreasing our risk in, not increasing our risk in. I'm happy to go with what the committee thinks as a whole, but I guess on top of that, a question, if I may. How many local authority counterparties have we had in your recent memory where we've actually loaned 10 million? Is that a common occurrence? Or, I mean, because what I'm wondering is if we tend to lend 3 or 5, why don't we increase the limit to 50 but reduce the counterparty to 5 as some sort of compromise?
There's a mix. We have lent up to the 10 million, where we're very certain that they are kind of quite strong, and there's been some, I think, the Scottish local authorities where there's less of the challenges than in some of the English ones, but it is a mix between sort of anywhere up to the 3 to 5, up to 10. So we feel that the counterparty up to 10 is gives us that flexibility and opportunity there where we've got returns coming in. But we also feel the overall limit of 50 would be still managing that risk appropriately. It's not out of kilter with other investments that we're making, given the low risk and that for these that we consider, and just the market as well is in terms of kind of wider managing, obviously the security and liquidity. We also do want to try and maximise the return in a falling rate environment, and that they're offering some of the better rates as well, which is obviously a consideration after others, but is still one I'm mindful of.
Yeah, it's important to note that return is third on our list. Security is first, liquidity is second, and return is third. What I don't want to do is have this administration chasing returns to make the MTFS balance by increasing our exposure to local authorities when it doesn't necessarily need to do so. And I hear what you're saying about the loans being proportionate and or not out of kilter with others. Some of our supranational stuff is with the European Reconstruction Bank or the World Bank or big organisations like this. It doesn't seem to me to be proportionate that we would lend 50 million to the local government sector in £5-10 million loans potentially, yet only lend 30 or 40 million to huge European reconstruction banks. That seems to me to be out of kilter. Sorry, I'm not really inclined to let this one go, and I would quite like this committee to make a recommendation to, is it Cabinet or Council on this one? To Council on this one, that we at least keep it static or reduce it. There's a lot more. I've got some grey hairs. There's a few more grey hairs around the table as well, and I don't know. I just starting to feel that experience is. We should be cautious in the current environment, is my view. I don't know if anyone wants to add to that, Jackie.
Yeah, I'm with you, Chair, on this. I do think. I mean, I've heard and listened to what's been said from the more expert voices. But as I say, I mean, I'm very low. I'm very risk averse personally, and hearing this, we're diminishing our treasury. We're having less liquid assets as well, and then we're going to have potentially something that there's a lot of unknowns about what's coming around the corner, even if it's quite a way down the line. I just want to clarify. So we're doing this so that we can potentially reduce the lower yield on the bond side of it. Was that right? And then to come back to, and then to put it into something where we could potentially get slightly better return.
It's just to give the flexibility within the portfolio, recognising that we are moving from longer term investments in the bond fund and recognising that we're not going to be investing there into shorter term. The supranational bonds are at 50 million, the money market funds are at 50 million. We're just aligning those. It's been recommended by MUFG, our Treasury Management Advisors, that local authority and ultra short dated bonds are a good fit for what we're looking to do within that. So it's not just my own opinion, it's come from our external advisors. In there, the risk is very, very, very low in these investments. There is a perceived reputational risk, which I'm very, very mindful of, and will go extra cautious in this, and we do as a team. I'm really, it's not going to change things significantly. It just doesn't give us that flexibility within the portfolio to do that. We're just trying to rebalance it. We're not asking to double it. We're just trying to align it with supranational and money market and just rebalance that. It's a suggestion, as I say, backed by our treasury management advisors. I think we've discussed the risks. I recognise the reputational risks. I think the financial risks are lower than with some of the others potentially, but we'll take the recommendation of committee and take it on board. But I wouldn't recommend that. I've put forward what we feel is appropriate as officers, and it is obviously managed by me. But obviously, council give the ultimate recommendation on this.
And this is a treasury management team that's delivered benchmark meeting returns over the last 12 months for us. So, arguing against myself, Councillor James.
Yeah, just say, because I mentioned the administration, we don't want the administration doing. Obviously, treasury management is very much in the hands of our 151 officer. So obviously, as a council, we set the strategy, and then it's for the 151 officer to operate within that strategy, doing what he can that's best for the council. I think what we're talking about here is limits. We're not talking about if you say yes, or council says yes, we're going to go and lend 50 million quid to local governments tomorrow. It's about saying the limit is there. Inevitably, particularly with LGR and the capital programme, if we end up in a situation where we are sitting on £5 million, that's a receipt that isn't going to go out straight away, you want to get a return on that £5 million. You don't want to just sitting there depreciating for a year. So it gives them the flexibility to say, actually, we can do a short-term 1-year loan, get a good return on this, so it's still got the same value when we look to spend that money in the capital programme 2 years later. So I would not be too fearful, because this is setting limits rather than actually saying this is what we're going to do.
Councillor Bound, Ms. Bound.
Just to add, I think it's one of those things, isn't it, that says this council has always been fortunate enough to be able to be very, very cautious. And what's been presented with us in the previous paper is reducing that sort of liquidity versus property down to, in percentage terms, as Councillor Tustain has articulated really clearly, to what looks like a very small percentage. And then we're talking about something which even conceptually starts feeling like something that says, and I take your point, Gavin, that says we might not do it, but actually I've also heard Richard turn around and say there aren't many other people in the market to lend to other authorities, so I can almost guarantee we will end up doing it, because somebody wants to borrow the money, we've got it to borrow, and actually we also want the return. But there is something about that, because I think, just to articulate it, I think what we're facing is just, we are historically really cautious, and what we're being presented with is something that's sort of, even if it's conceptually, challenges some of that, because we've changed the percentage massively about what's liquidly as far as availability versus property, and we're talking about putting something into something which, even from perceptions as far as lending money to local authorities, but of course I think we do also have to caveat it, just again to put the other side, that says we also know, right, that local authorities don't go bankrupt. They're not businesses. They pay their debts. We've heard only one local authority in probably what is 40 years hasn't repaid their debt. We are only talking about our availability to get it back in waiting. That's why I say, actually, I think we're talking in both papers, the sensitivity is the same issue. And we're just really being asked to say, how do we feel about that? And can we get some comfort any other way when, in some respects, Adam, going down to 30 million is very close to your saying the minimum is 25 million. Do you see what I mean? So actually, whether it's 10 million, whether it's 5 million, we're talking about numbers which all get very close to each other.
I think we're conflating two different bits. We're conflating where we're going to potentially be in 4 years' time, which is a forecast based on our strategy and our available resources, and where we might, and then we're also saying how comfortable are we increasing effectively our exposure to a certain sector that we are in ourselves, and that will not and cannot go bankrupt, has the ability to raise taxes. So it's we don't have any concerns in lending to central government and to putting it with the money market, with the HM Treasury. We can put 100% of our amounts in there if we wanted to. we're saying actually local authorities are riskier than that when they've still got the same tax raising powers. They have a strong track record of repayments, and it's being advised to us by our external advisors to kind of just balance it. It doesn't mean that, as Councillor James has said, that we will go fully up to the 50 million. We may not. It gives us that flexibility to see what's out there and balance the portfolio. It is trying to make sure that we are utilising the funds that we have set aside for treasury management in the best way to maximise the return, subject to the other considerations that I have as 151 officer, but to support the services we deliver as an authority. We're in a falling rate environment, as Richard indicated. The returns there are good. Doesn't mean that that's the only reason we're going there. They are also safer, and they are short and medium term. There aren't many options when you're looking at short medium term. So that's part of the reason. But I think looking at where we're going to end up in 2030, when we know that will be a different picture anyway, is slightly different to this discussion.
Simon.
I just want to be clear. I was articulating a view on balance. I on balance support the increase to 50 million, but I think it's just being really clear about what I can sense the sensitivity is. And the caveat I put in is that says local government doesn't go bust, right? You know, we can hear lots of scare stories about extraordinary financial support and 114 notices, but there is a reality about that says this isn't the company that can go pop and we don't get our money back. And that's why I articulate on balance, I would just feel more comfortable if actually we were just taking a slightly different approach on the previous paper. And I hear what you're saying about conflating it, but of course, I think what we're dealing with as councillors is our sensitivity to what both of these things feel like taken in one meeting.
Michael.
Just going back to what you said earlier, you wanted a recommendation put to council that we reduce the maximum loan from 10 to 5. Are we still discussing that point? And if so, we seem to have gone off topic slightly.
Thank you. What I was suggesting was that we consider making a recommendation to council that, or perhaps we seek a clarification after the meeting before council about what the administration's view is on capital balance or treasury management strategy capital balance after 2030. To which they might just turn around and say, it's not in the MTFS, go away. And I think that would be a fine answer, by the way. But they might say, yeah, no, the plan is to grow it, not shrink it. And that may be enough reassurance that Councillor Rice is looking for. Is that fair, John? You're looking for a direction of travel or a number?
I think what I'm really looking for is a principle about having too many of our resources being illiquid, and a request that the Chief Financial Officer takes that into account in his future strategy, because it's open to him, as he said, each year passes, to look at different ways of potentially financing the very significant capital programme that we've got.
Do you have a view, Adam, on how you'd best like to address that? Because I can see this causing an unnecessary stir at council with people who haven't got anywhere near as much of the 2 hours of discussion on it that we've had.
I'll take that. Views from Food Committee. Obviously, we are preparing the capital programme update that will come soon, and that is financed in a certain way. It's as we get further into kind of 28, 29 when we will start utilising more of this as is shown in this report. It's a fair point, and it's a balance though. As you say, it's being able to sell those liquid assets at the right time and get that. And I'm not responsible for those. That sits with Sarah Longthorpe and obviously Martin and Liz in terms of managing that portfolio. That has, again, we'll come on to that paper later, has generated a good return. So there's a balance of making sure that we are utilising the resources we have and kind of not putting a hole in the revenue budget as well.
Councillor Isaac.
So just because of my background, my history as the predecessor to Councillor James, I know that there are potential assets that we hold as a council that it might be appropriate for us to dispose of, and so I know that you both are aware of that, and I'm taking the opportunity at this meeting to just highlight that as something that ought to be a consideration in the next few years.
Councillor James, you were dead heat, and I let Councillor Isaac go first, but that seems
That's absolutely fine. Age before beauty. I was going to say, the 151 officer is amazingly powerful because they have the ability to stand up in full council and say, you can't do that. Because and in terms of identifying what we should hold in liquid assets available for anything is up to the 151 officer. It's not up to the cabinet, it's not up to full council. He can say, no, stop. And so clearly, when you look at the numbers as they are, the next capital programme, once the new leisure centre is out the way, it will look a much smaller programme because you've got to rebuild those funds. You'll notice from the MTFS we put £4 million of revenue each year into the capital programme to top up the fact that you've got SEAL. We don't get new homes bonus anymore. So we are constantly topping it up. I've just looked back for the same paper that you're seeing now from 2022, which said we would only have £70 million in our, 63 million pounds available now, and we've actually got 107. And that's because, exactly as Councillor Isaac points out, there are assets out there which at some point may be disposed of, which will top up that figure, which means actually, I think we can't tell what's going to happen in 3 or 4 years' time, but there are things that are going to go. So I think we're probably over-worrying. I think probably over-worrying about the fact that you wouldn't overexpose yourself to local authorities, particularly local authorities going through LGR, because you just wouldn't do that. And so we have to trust our 151 officer, because ultimately he can be dragged before you and you can make him sit down there and explain himself if he comes back in 2 years' time and he's messed it all up. So I don't think having these limits are probably just allowing the flexibility and probably not worth worrying about, because it's his reputation on the line as anything else.
I think you make a fair point. I think we're conflating the issues again, and I think that the policy document is there to protect the 151 officer as much as it's there to assist them and aid them. I want to wrap this up. Councillor Isaac, rest of the committee, would you be happy for me to write to the 151 officer and cabinet and just say that this committee wants or would just like those parts of the council to be mindful of our liquid capital reserves beyond 2030, and is patiently waiting at the appropriate time for an answer of what the plans are for that, or something along those lines? John, I'm looking. Everyone else is nodding, but I'm looking at you because it's your question, really.
I think that's broadly on the right lines. Yes, yeah. I'm sure if that works for Adam, then that's good. We're making our point. We're here to provide constructive comment.
Correct.
And support.
And to be told that we can't do that, don't feel quite right, does it? Not that we were told we can't do it. It's just trying to work out who to say it to through the right channel. The second point was, do we want to make any sort of recommendation about loans to local government based on everything you've heard? There's one other thing I wanted to add on that. I don't think it's particularly material, but loans to national and local government don't have a sustainability flag attached to them, so we can't measure the degree to which our investments are in line with current ecological best practice. So that's just one other consideration. We've lived with that situation with national bonds for quite some time. I'm sure we've lived with that position with local bonds, just hadn't noticed it before either. Is the committee happy to proceed with the 10 million increase and the 10 million per counterparty risk based on the discussion that's happened? Okay, great. Thank you. In that case, I'm not anticipating any more questions on that paper. So Does the committee agree that they've considered and commented on the draft Treasury Management Strategy for 26-27? Agreed. Fantastic. Thank you. We'll move on to item 6, which is the Capital Investment Strategy for 26-27. I'll ask our 151 officer, Adam Swain, to introduce the report. Adam.
Thank you, Chair. Yep, me again. So this is another update strategy for 26-27 that will go on to council, and just sets out kind of our approach to capital investment. Page 44 shows kind of the capital investment strategy and how things like the treasury management strategy, the capital programme that will be going to Cabinet and Council, and the non-treasury investment strategy linked together, and then also into the property investment strategy that's the next part of the strategic asset management plan on the next item on the agenda. It's a standard report really. It's not changed significantly. It's just setting out kind of the update based on the next capital programme update, and the expected resources, and how we propose to use those, and the updated prudential indicators that we're required to provide, including on external debt and those things that we clearly don't have at this stage, but we're still required to provide those. I wasn't going to go into much more detail, but obviously again happy to accept kind of questions and have a discussion on this paper.
Thank you, Adam. Councillor Isaac.
So, Adam, there's cross-party support for the redevelopment of the leisure park and a provision of a new aquadrome, but it is a large amount of money that we're talking about spending, 60 odd million. So I just got a few questions about it. Is to what degree can we have some confidence that it is just going to be 60 million at this point? And it might not be a lot more than that. Secondly, can you just remind me what sort of level of revenue we might expect from that investment of 60 million? And the third question then is, what do you expect the value of the aquadrome to be once it's built? How's that going to be assessed?
Adam?
We are currently going through the evaluation process for the tenders for this, and I'm part of that, so I won't go into great detail. Councillor Isaac, as you can imagine, that's not appropriate. What I will say is that the requirements under that tender were for a scheme that was within that £60 million envelope, and anything above that would to be funded else by the provider. So we expect that to be the case. In terms of return, again, would expect a return to the council positively. Won't obviously cover the 60 million, but there will be an ongoing annual return is the expectation from that. And in terms of the value of the asset when it's built, it will be subject to the external valuation by our valuers as any other asset that is on our balance sheet.
John, you have a follow-up question?
Yeah, just so, would you expect, in terms of value though, it's sort of a replacement value, so we would expect the value to be approximate to the cost, wouldn't we? I'm not expecting, at least initially, any sort of great divergence between cost and value.
Again, I would imagine that would be the right assumption. It's not built yet, clearly, and it would be down to valuers, but I can't see why there would be any impairment of the value, and it should exceed that. But I don't know at this stage. It depends on the valuation basis of it, because obviously it'll be done on a depreciated replacement cost valuation properly, so that may be different. But at the start of it, that should be equivalent to the build cost, given it's been built.
Well, you could look at that now and just check, make sure you're happy with that. That it's going to be broadly equivalent.
Do property valuers offer that service?
I'm unaware of that. Obviously, we're it's part of the design and consideration of what's going in and the facilities there. I can't imagine that it would be a kind of be well below the value it was constructed. As I say, it would be on a depreciated replacement cost basis, which takes account of the cost of construction at that time and in that location for the modern equivalent asset, which it would be.
And it's a fair question, John. I just think that the one thing it won't be worth is what you spent on it. It might be worth a few quid less, or it might be worth a few quid more, but trying to get it to be worth exactly what you spend on it is a bit like landing a helicopter on a 10p piece. But it's, I think it's a very valid question, because I think construction costs are shooting up, and but I just think it's a question we won't know the answer to until, is it Montague Evans, our valuers? Until they do that red book valuation exercise. Councillor James.
Just to say, it'd be a paper value because we're not going to sell it. And so we are building it so that all the people at Basingstoke have access to healthy activities and have all that social benefits, well-being benefits of having access to a modern swimming plus other sporty things kind of venue. And we recognise that we'll build it, they will come, and in 40 years' time we'll probably have to replace it. So the value will drop to zero in 40 years' time, and our successors will be sitting around a table discussing how we replace that leisure park that was built in 2029. So I don't think the value really matters in terms of we are obviously going to get value for money, because otherwise we would just say no to the deal. But we'll get value for money, we'll get a fantastic centre, and it's the generations of people that will enjoy it and benefit from it that really matters to us as a local authority. This is not something we're doing for profit or gain.
Thank you. I think that points to the part of the return as well, which is a social dividend rather than a monetary dividend, right? Rather than an income stream. But it's good to hear it will have an income stream associated with it. Jack, Councillor Tustain, you had a question.
I was going to say Gavin's pretty much answered it, and I was also going to say it's a social value and health value, which is going to definitely pay for itself. And the question I was going to ask was about the lifespan, so all covered.
Is it a 40-year lifespan, or was that a guess, Gavin?
I think it was, the current one is hard to compare against because it started as the Westfield Lido and open, and then we've sort of put a roof on it and then a window round it and then dug it out and changed it a bit. So I think 40 to 50 years was the lifespan we expected from it. That's generally the rule of any water-based place, is 40 to 50 years.
Thank you. Any more questions on the capital investment strategy? Councillor Isaac.
Sorry, me again. I see that we're looking to spend about 11.6 million on operational buildings under this strategy. So it just raises the question with me about awareness of buildings becoming surplus to requirements as we go, as local government reorganisation takes effect. So I was just flagging that up.
Where's that on the papers, John?
It's page 50.
Thank you.
Just underneath the table. So it's just an awareness point, I think. I'm sure you have that. We're also on page 51, 5.3. We're forecasting 7.1 million of sales under the property investment strategy, and I think that the idea is that those are reinvested in property. So there may be opportunities there in harking back to our earlier conversation. And just finally, Chair, if you bear with me, could you explain page 53, 6.6? There will be a future requirement beyond 2029 to charge MRP in respect of the redevelopment of the leisure park, starting the year after the asset becomes operational, and this will be charged over 50 years. Could you give that, sort of explain that in layman's terms?
Adam.
Yeah, that again comes back to the previous point that we are using our own internal resources to fund part of the new leisure park, and as such, it comes under the regulations that we are effectively borrowing the same as external borrowing, and we are required to make a minimum revenue provision, so set aside an amount to repay that over the life of the asset. As Councillor James indicated earlier, we expect the life of that asset to be 50 years, so that would be a set aside of 10 million, for example, over 50 years. So we do a 50th of that each year to repay that.
So you're expecting it to last 10 years longer than he is that right?
That would be our kind of our basis for that. Obviously, would be subject to kind of review by IR valuers, but that is our expectation.
All done. The concept of internal borrowing still confuses me. Yeah, and Adam, there you go. So I think it just emphasises how our financial circumstances are different to a lot of other councils in that respect, that we have these things we need to adhere to, but they don't really have an enormous amount of relevance to us. Anyway, if there are no more questions on that, then does the committee agree that they have considered and commented on the capital investment strategy for 26-27? Thank you. That's agreed. Moving on to item 7, the Strategic Asset Management Plan 26-27 to 28-29. Before I ask the officers to introduce this one, there's a couple of things on here. If you turn to page 71 in your pack, there is a list of things on that front page, and beneath Appendix 4 it says papers relied on JLL Property Investment Review. Only councillors haven't had sight of that paper, and so we want to have that line, we want to have it in the minutes struck out that we have considered that paper, because we haven't. Next, before I ask officers to introduce this paper, I do need to advise the committee that there's a confidential appendix within the report at Appendix 4, and ask if they want to discuss the content in that pink paper, we will need to enter confidential session. Is anyone planning to ask questions around Appendix 4? I'm getting shakes of the head, so that's helpful, thank you. So I'll ask Martin Jones and or the portfolio holder, the double act, to introduce, have debate and close the item, it says here. There we go. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. You'll see in front of you the Strategic Asset Management Plan in 4 appendix, covering the property investment strategy, the operational property strategy, and the annual property plan, and the confidential Appendix 4, which gives a target list of disposals and lease years. Over the past 5 years, our property portfolio has undergone a period of significant transformation and improvement through disciplined, proactive asset management, a stable team, and a clear investment strategy. We have delivered strong performance for the council, increasing annual rental income, improving income security, modernising aging assets, and supporting regeneration initiatives across the borough. This period has demonstrated the value of a strategic, evidence-led approach, underpinned by strong governance and the effective use of specialist advisors. As we look ahead to 26 to 29, the papers before members set out the next stage of our journey. The Strategic Asset Management Plan and the updated property investment strategy build firmly on the progress already made, while responding to a new set of challenges and opportunities. Evolving market conditions, the Council's climate change commitments, growing regeneration ambitions, and the implications of the local government reorganisation. Our focus will remain on protecting and growing sustainable revenue, recycling capital to reinvest in either higher performance properties, improving our existing asset base and more resilient, to make them more resilient, and ensuring our operational estate is safe, efficient and fit for the future. This is a forward-looking strategy and strengthens our direction of travel, modernising the portfolio, enhancing environmental performance, driving regeneration in key areas, and ensuring that our assets continue to deliver robust financial returns and tangible community benefits. I'm pleased to present these papers, which set a clear and responsible course for the next 3 years, building on the foundations we have laid and positioning the Council for the long-term resilience and would welcome your comments to make the Cabinet recommendations contained within the papers. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. Did you have anything you wanted to add, Councillor James?
Only we're alive to the issue that this is for 3 years and we're possibly not. So we are completely aware of that. And certainly once the government announce what the new local authorities will be, in terms of, we're hoping the sooner the better, we will obviously have discussions looking at certainly around operational property, but also in terms of investment property and where we're maybe overexposed or underexposed to certain sectors, depending what Rushmore have. If we end up joining up with Winchester and East Hampshire as well, that creates even more issues around a housing revenue account to try and absorb in some form or fashion, and lots more debts lurking around, which will have an impact on the way we do treasury management, because they've got borrowing and we haven't. So we are alert to that. But as you'll see with the MTFS and with the capital and everything else we're doing, we have to do what is responsible for us as Basingstoke and Dean Council on the basis that we are going to be here. We are doing exactly what we would do if we were going to carry on forever and there's no LGR. So, but that reassurance is we are doing what's right for Basingstoke and Dean continually, but we are fully aware that we are going to have to respond at some point to the fact that when LGR is finalised, we may have to revisit some elements of this.
Thank you, Councillor James. It does just re-emphasise, I think, what Councillor Tustain was mentioned earlier and which I alluded to, and which Richard Hubbard has covered before for us, that the council carries on as its own separate legal entity, irrespective of LGR, to some extent, or to a large extent. That is the assets of this council and the duties of these officers and these councillors and so on. And then everything stops on one day. And there's and Richard, please tell me if I misquote you, but I think you said there was something like an unholy mess or something, while everyone then runs around and tries to form the new council, which, you know, we all shook our heads at that, but I believe that's the reality of LGR.
Well, I think it has been, but I don't think it has to be, because actually I think the earlier you start those conversations about do we want to expose ourselves to buying into a large retail park when already the councils we're joining are very overexposed to retail as a sector, we might take a different view because obviously, and we've got to be aware of what property they've got, what debts they've got, and actually have a bigger zoom out view. And the sooner you make those decisions, the more time you've got to make sensible, good value decisions rather than coming together and panicking on vesting day.
I'm glad of that, and it's reassuring to hear. And I know that this committee was keen to support the council in whichever way it could on those questions. I did write to the Chief Exec and to the Leader of the Council on this matter on behalf of the committee. I believe I followed up twice. I never received a reply. Thank you. Gripe out of the way. So, has anyone got any questions on the annual property plan? Councillor Blackberry.
Not a question, there's just a typo on page 90. Figure 1, it says it's from the period 2012 to 2026. It's 2021 to 2026. So.
Thank you. Any more typos, John?
No, not a typo. I would like to congratulate the property team and even the young cabinet member for the continuing good performance of our property portfolio. And also the degree to which we have worked the property portfolio with the lease re-gears, which have generated additional income and have allowed the modernisation of properties. There's just one point, one question, which is at page 76, 2.11. It says here that the annual property plan in future years will be approved by Cabinet, following review by this committee, but it won't be going to council. And so I wanted to understand why it was thought that it was no longer necessary to take the annual property plan to council. And I think that this committee ought to at least alert council to the fact that they won't be receiving this report in future if we're persuaded this is a good idea.
Thank you, John. Great spot. Liz.
I don't know why you're doing it.
That's a great spot. This isn't actually a change. So when the strategic asset management plan was adopted last time, the previous one, the intention was that the annual property forms part of this, because we do an annual property plan each year, so that it's always been the strategy gets approved by full council and the annual property plan is approved by cabinet. So that governance hasn't changed. It's just that this is obviously an opportunity for them to see the whole package, because the annual property plan is part of that strategy. It's the delivery of that strategy.
So if you're right.
Sorry, so it's always been split between council and cabinet, but on this occasion we're putting both to cabinet? Yeah, I got confused.
Well, I believe that when it was approved last time, that it went as part of the sort of the package, so that the council can see the full sort of the full papers.
So it was included almost by accident.
For information, I suppose.
Included for information, and now it's being taken out for disinformation.
Well, no, because
Yes.
So, and Liz can correct me if I'm getting this wrong. I think there isn't a change here. The previous strategic asset management plan that was approved in 2021 included provision of an annual property plan that comes to this committee and then goes on to cabinet and never went on to council. This is just confirming that that is still the case, that the strategic asset management plan will be approved by council for this 3-year period. There will then be an annual property plan that comes to this committee in January and then goes on to cabinet. It never went on to council, and that has not changed. It might just be clarification in the wording here, perhaps.
Your question, John. Are you happy? Or your
No, I can't recall whether the annual property plan each year comes to council. If you're telling me that it hasn't, and therefore this isn't any change, then that's fine.
Liz.
I'm relying on your what you're saying is correct.
Sorry, John, I cut you off. Liz.
yes, and if you look at the recommendations, that's why within those it says about the annual property plan being approved by cabinet, and then the ones recommendations to council are the strategic asset management plan. So that sort of just clarifies that that's how it was dealt with before.
Chair, I think it's the policy that's got to go to council, if I'm correct, not the asset management plan.
Policy to cabinet, plan to plan. Policy to council,
yeah.
plan to cabinet. I'm clearly too tired. Okay. Any more questions on this paper? I'm not seeing any. So, does the committee agree to? There's quite a long recommendation here, so if you bear with me. 1. Note the contents of the Strategic Asset Management Plan 26, 27 to 28, 29 and appendices 1 to 4, including the property investment strategy, and provide any comments for consideration by cabinet, if any. I don't think we have any comments. Note the contents of 2. Note the contents of the property investment strategy, and provide any comments for consideration by cabinet, if any. 3. Recommend cabinet approve the annual property plan 26-27, subject to comments, if any. Is that agreed? Fantastic. We'll move on to item 8, the Audit and Accounts Work Programme. That's in the back of the pack. I mean, it's there. Has anyone got any questions on it? No? Fantastic. Then we'll consider that agreed, if that needs agreeing. And then there's no outstanding actions on the tracking log. So that brings the meeting to an end. Thank you all for your time. It's 7:44. I believe our next meeting is in March, by which time I hope that we will have signed off our accounts. We have to have done. There we go. Thank you, everybody, for your time. Bye-bye.